Congress to approve the deal. There are members of Congress who are skeptical of the agreement, including, most crucially, some from the president's own party. Joining me now is one of those members, one of those Democrats, Congressman Sherman of California. Congressman, my understanding is you are uncommitted on the deal. What are your reservations, and have you found the president's case persuasive?
Well, first I want to put this in context. When the president took office, he was in a very tough position because his predecessor had not only blocked all new sanctions laws during 8 years, but had refused to enforce any of the sanctions laws that had been adopted in the 1990s. Now, that will sound odd because George W. Bush was so noted for his aggressiveness. But you've got to realize that sanctions are sanctions on international oil companies, especially the sanctions that we adopted in the 1990s that President George W. Bush refused to enforce. So Iran had gone from 0 to well over 5,000 centrifuges. It was going all out, and the president has been trying to put a brake on this program, starting from a very difficult position. That being said, this deal has some good aspects to it and bad aspects to it in the first year. And then later on, and by then we're going to have a different Congress, a different administration, I think it's got some really big problems. The good part of this deal, and the critics aren't giving the president credit for this, is that 95% of Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium, uranium that could be purified to make 10 bombs, has to be shipped out of the country before Iran gets any benefits. Second, 2/3 of Iran's centrifuges need to be mothballed before Iran gets the benefits. That's very important. The bad part of the initial phase of this agreement is that Iran will get its hands on $120 billion or so of its own money. They will use this to help their own people to some degree because they've built expectations.
But let me stop you there for 1 second, Congressman, because the president points to this repeatedly, and people who back this deal who basically say the money is coming either way because the sanctions regime that has been held together through the P5+1 is just not sustainable any longer in the absence of a sort of negotiating framework or a deal.
I think that they may be right as of today. I don't think that was true 2 days ago. But now that the president has declared that Iran has signed a deal and is being reasonable, I think it will be hard to put the sanctions back on. And I think the president is correct in saying not what is your alternative, but even more, what alternative do you have, assuming that the president is against you, assuming that European countries have been told it's now reasonable to do business with Iran. It's not what is your alternative 2 days ago, it's what's your alternative today. And I don't think that we have an effective plan for the next year and a half that works better than accepting the good parts of this deal that the president has negotiated. That being said,
you sound, Congressman, like you've just talked yourself into voting yes on our air.
No, because we've got to make sure that this deal is not binding on future administrations. Because next decade, Iran gets to build an enormous, allegedly peaceful program. A program so large that just the crumbs from the fringes will be enough to build several nuclear weapons. So what I've talked myself into is to say, for the next year and a half, maybe we should not prevent the president from carrying out his policy, which has pluses and minuses, and go to war with the president while we're trying to deal with Iran at the same time. But we've got to make sure that this deal is not morally or legally binding on future administrations, because we're going to have to go back with this or that to cajoling or threat and turn to the Iranians and say, you have accepted certain limits for 10 years, they have to be extended.
Yeah, there's been a lot about the binding and non-binding, and it does seem to me that what ultimately will bind the deal, should it go forward, is the performance of all the parties on either side of it, since, international law is largely can be a fiction in reality. So I understand that concern. Representative Brad Sherman from California, thank you very much.